It's working. Hare Krishna. Let's just move this a little closer. Good. System there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So we have here Ladini Shakti, Riel, Gaetano, Dominique, Patrick, George, Danielle, Anne, Leah, Malini, and I'm assuming there with Malini is Narayan and Ezzy. And here there's Bhakti Keith and Ramachandra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, entitled Purusha Sukta Confirmed. We are on text 11. Text 11, it's March 22nd, 2020. Text 11, Chapter 6, Canto 2. Yeah? Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumsa Vidayam Manasa Padam Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso Vidayam Manasa Padam Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso Vidayam Manasa Padam Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso Vidayam Manasa Padam. Who else would like to chant the verse?
Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uddanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso Vidayam Manasa Padam.
Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso
Vidayam Manasa Padam.
They're on the internet if anyone would like to chant the verse.
Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram Viditam Pumso Vidayam Manasa Padam
Avyakta Rasa Sindhunam Uttanam Nidhanasya Cha Udaram viditam pumso.
Udaram
Viditam pumso.
Hridayam manasa padam.
Hridayam
Hridayam manasapadam.
Avyaktarasa sindhunam
Rasa sindhunam.
Bhutanam nidhanasya cha
Bhutanam
Nidanasya cha.
Udaram viditam pumso
Udaram
Viditam pumso.
Hridayam manasapadam
Hridayam
Manasapadam.
Avyaktarasa sindhunam
Avyaktarasa sindhunam.
Bhutanam nidhanasya cha
Bhutanam nidanasya cha.
Udaram viditam pumso
Udaram viditam pumso.
Hridayam manasa padam
Hridayam
Manasapadam.
Okay, and so we'll go to the word for word. Avyakta,
Avyakta,
the impersonal feature,
the impersonal feature.
Rasa Sindhunam,
Rasa sindhunam.
of the seas and oceans of water,
Of the seas and oceans of water.
Bhutanam,
Bhutanam.
of those who take birth in the material world,
Those who take birth in the material world.
Nidanasya,
Nidanasya.
of the annihilation,
Of the annihilation.
Cha,
Cha.
also,
Also.
Udaram,
Udaram.
his belly,
His belly.
Viditam,
Viditam.
is known by the intelligent class of men,
Is known by the intelligent class of man.
Pumsa,
Shamsa.
of the great personality,
The great personality.
Hridayam,
Hridayam.
the heart, Manasa,
Manasa.
of the subtle body,
The subtle body.
Padam,
Padam.
the place.
The place.
Translation. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entity. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. Hare Krishna. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 17 and 18, it is stated that according to human calculations, one day of Brahma is equal to 1,000 ages of 4 millenniums, 4,300,000 years each, and the same period is calculated to be his night also. A Brahma lives for 100 such years and then dies. A Brahma, who is generally a great devotee of the Lord, attains liberation after such a downfall. The universe, called the Brahmanda, or the round football-like domain controlled by Brahma, is thus annihilated, and thus the inhabitants of a particular planet or of the whole universe are also annihilated. Avyakta, mentioned here in this verse, means the night of Brahma, when partial annihilation takes place and the living entities of that particular Brahmanda up to the planets of Brahmaloka, along with the big oceans, etc., all repose in the belly of the Virat Purusha. At the end of Brahma's night, the creation again takes place, and the living entities reserved within the belly of the Lord are let loose and play their respective parts as if being awakened from a deep slumber. Since the living entities are never destroyed, the annihilation of the material world does not annihilate the existence of the living entities. But until liberation is attained, one has to accept one material body after another, again and again. The human life is meant for making a solution to this repeated change of bodies, and thereby attaining a place in the spiritual sky where everything is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. In other words, the subtle forms of the living entities take place in the heart of the Supreme Being, and such forms take tangible shape at the time of creation. Hare Krishna. Okay. Omanganatmiyandasya Gananjana Shalataya Chakshurannalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurudaya Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamubhakadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Kapakamalam Shri Guru and Vaishtam Shah Shri Upam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Pedan Sagana Lalita Sri Ishakanjitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Mostute Tapta Kanchan Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpate Yogyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Vavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesha Tarine Jainam Namaspitya Naram Charinavaktamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamurti Raya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisance to the personality of God and Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, Nasta Prayeshu Bhagaveshu Nitam Bhagavata Sevi, Bhagavat Yutamai Shloki, Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki, Vyaktarasa Sindhunam Bhutanam Nidanasita Udaram Vidikam Pumso Vidayam Manasapadam. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entities. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. Hare Krishna. Haribo. Okay. Well, first we can note that Prabhupada refers to the Brahmanda as a round football-like domain controlled by Brahma. So I feel certain that Prabhupada's conception is this would be a European football, what we call soccer, not American football, not one of these oblong-shaped.
That's the real football. Our football is the real football.
We should get it.
Prabhupada knows that.
Apparently. We could get into a whole argument here, but let's focus on Bhagavatam. Who brought up football in the first? Oh, okay, so actually it's described, Prabhupada played football, soccer, and he would always request when they would have, he would always request to be goalie because he didn't like to run a lot. He said, I want to be goalie so I won't have to run a lot.
I can ask a question, David?
Yeah.
Because my understanding is that it's shaped like an egg. It will be more like American football, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like it describes that the universe is shaped like an egg, and I never thought that it was shaped like a round ball.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I just don't think Prabhupada had a conception of the American football. And so, yes, Brahmananda. At the same time, when we read about the dimensions of the universe, it seems to be equidistant. Well, first of all, Vedic astronomy gives Western type calculations in terms of quadrillions of miles and things like that. But when we look in the dimension of the demigod's dimension, it's described that the diameter is 4 billion miles, like whether you go horizontal or diagonal. So that does indicate round. That does indicate round. And then perhaps when you get into the coverings, but so that's it talks about a diameter. Diameter is a circular thing. Right. So it'd be an interesting research to look at what's the relation to the egg shape and the circle shape. But when it talks about the diameter of the universe, it's equidistant. Okay. Interesting discussion. So Prabhupada liked to play goalie because he didn't have to run that much. He liked to bicycle. He would bicycle all over Calcutta. That's described in Prabhupada's pastime. Okay, so this is about universal form and like that. And this chapter, it kind of builds on this, and it'll go to different places in the discussion. But universal, so I'm getting the essence here. I'm getting the essence, apart from like, okay, it's universal form, is it eternal form, is it imaginary, is it? The essence, as I see it, is like, there's a purpose to nature. There's a purpose to nature, it's described here. And there's a purpose to the creation. And the idea is within nature, we can understand our purpose to get out of the cycle of birth and death. We can understand ourselves as spirit soul. We can understand something about some higher intelligence. Whether it's in what's called the universal form, or Rasoham Apsukuntiya, Krishna says, I'm the taste of water. So there, the taste of water, through that material energy, we can see spirit, whether it's impersonal spirit or personal spirit. That's another distinction. But we can learn to see whether universal form or the deity form of the Lord. Krishna appears in brass or in paint or in wood or in marble. Okay. But the idea is within different material manifestations, visible to our eyes and accessible to our senses, then we get to spiritualize our existence. And this is a guide to do that. This is a guide to do that. And again, whether we see the Santa Fe River and it reminds us of Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Krishna's wandering on the banks of Yamuna playing his flute. Or we see the Santa Fe River or the Delaware River.
Or the hill.
Or the hill. And then it reminds us of the bones of the Virat Purusha. This is like overdone. Still, there's distinctions, but the principle is we get to advance in our spiritual life through the perceptions of the senses. And the principle is like everything's conscious. It's described in the Brahma Samhita. Eko Pyasora Chayitum Jagaranda Koti Yat Chaktirasti Jagaranda Chayayaranda Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. That Krishna, through an expansion of his expansion, the Purusha avatars, Krishna is the super soul of the entire universe. He's the super soul of the entire material creation as the Mahavishnu, the super soul of the entire universe as the Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarasta. He's the super soul within the heart of each atom, within the heart of all living entities as the Paramatma, as that super soul that we most often think of. Okay, the Paramatma. And so, okay, so everything's, and this is important because in, let's call it what's called like modern science. It's called like modern science. There's the axiomatic assumptions. Axiomatic means like they're not necessarily by many practitioners of modern science. They've not necessarily been explored or examined critically. Axiomatic assumptions. There is no reality other than material reality. Okay. Axiomatic assumption, we could go on and on, but another one is nature is purposeless. It's just blind evolution through random chance. Okay. So here we have assumptions that are different. No, consciousness is everywhere. Consciousness is within each atom. There's a purpose in the universe. And those are the assumptions here, and sometimes directly stated. So this, that intelligent conscious entities, they're starting with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is creating this material universe for a purpose. It's not just blind random chance. And so it's important because, like, maybe all of us grew up and conditioned in this lifetime by the paradigms of science and things like that. And so evolutionary paradigms, things like that. So for our own development of realization and trust in what the Bhagavatam is presenting, and in our own capacity to be potent, to share with others, we want to develop expertise in kind of inspiring a true spirit of discovery. That's a very scientific principle, a true spirit of discovery. And that's why so much that, let's call it scientism, means a dogmatic attachment to a particular worldview. It's very non-scientific, but it's become scientism, just like there's nationalism or racism or things like that. So it's scientism, and then it's very scientific because there will tend to be an unwillingness to actually explore. Oh, okay. So the idea is, everything's unconscious. Right, that consciousness. That's the thing with what goes in the name of materialistic science. There's a main problem is subjective experience. Right? There's just no explanation for it. There's just no explanation for it. There's lots of explanation for it in terms of Bhagavad Gita, in terms of very rational explanation. The soul continually passes from one body to the next. And we can empirically experience the body changing. There's some constant identity. We have a subjective experience, even easy enough to create a machine that might say, I see red. But okay, I'm looking at that kashipu there, that cushion. Kashipu, looking at that cushion. Okay, so I have an experience, I'm perceiving red. Okay, but no one's built a machine that can have that subjective experience. We might say science is geared towards so-called objectivity. So-called objectivity, it's an important point. Means it can only study objects external to the subject. There's no understanding of the subject. I say so-called objectivity because not that I'm a quantum physicist or things like that, but I've studied a little, and the idea of quantum physicists is that the mind, the consciousness, the subjective experience of the observer affects the objective reality. And then that really torpedoes the whole idea of objective materialism. So the idea is that consciousness is either an epiphenomena of when matter comes together, then boom, consciousness comes. Okay, then please combine matter, and create something conscious. It's not been done. So that requires. So it's very non-scientific because we don't have an experiment to illustrate it. We don't have an experiment to illustrate it. Or the idea is consciousness is just an illusion. It doesn't really exist. Okay. And then, so then we're all expected to deny our subjective experience. Or even something like Okay, look, we read about universal form, like the eye, the sun is the eye of the Lord, or things like that. Okay, so the idea is that, first of all, we can look at like any culture until, the recent modern cultures, any culture till the recent modern culture, accepted that the sun is a conscious entity. Okay, so now the idea is, well, they were dumb, we're smart, and we know that that smart people just don't believe that. Okay, smart people just don't believe that. But okay, let's apply the logical, rational process. So, okay, so if we look at the light bulb or the computer, then whenever there's a source of light, so we say, how did this happen? Did it happen by random chance? No, we know there's an intelligence behind this 100-watt light bulb at the generating station. And there's a whole management system, and there's a boss, and there's an engineer. So that's behind 100-watt light bulb. So if you get something with trillions and trillions of times the power of that light, well, then it actually makes sense that there's an intelligence that's much greater, much greater. This is logical. Okay. So I'll suggest it's arrogance, because like all cultures would have this conception, the sun's a conscious entity with a conscious purpose. All cultures until the modern industrial West, of course, which is also prevalent in the East now too. It's not a geographical thing. Or even the idea is, okay, let's look at an idea. I'm not going to even call it a theory, but let's look at the idea that life started in the primordial soup. Life started from soup. That's what they say. I'm not making it up, right? So, okay, so life started from soup. So the idea is through chemical reaction and electrical pulsation, consciousness began. All right. So on the sun, there's far, far, far greater chemical interaction and electrical pulsation than anything that ever existed on this planet. So therefore it makes sense that the sun's conscious. I'm saying by their own theory. We're just looking. The idea is to get people, maybe started with ourselves, to question these unexamined paradigms that go in the name of intellectualism. To question these unexamined paradigms. Okay. And then with that questioning, with that true open-mindedness, which is in the essence of the scientific method, that's a real value and quality, true open-mindedness. But in the name of what's going on in scientism and science, there's this dogmatic closedness. I've shared, maybe some of you have heard me share, that when I was doing my Maha Mantra research studies, and so I studied a lot about spiritually based interventions and whether it's related to suicidal people or related to health, or certainly mental health. That's part of PhD. You do a literature review on the topic and you find the gap in the literature, and then you fill the gap. The gap in the literature was, well, the most recommended mantra in the ancient Vedas is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. And no one has studied that in any rigorous fashion. No one had ever done a rigorous psychological inventory based on, so we did a whole literature on meditation researches. Anyhow, so I studied a lot about studies on prayer. And there was one study that sticks out, I'm remembering it now, 24 years later since I studied it. This study happened maybe 1989 or 1990. I remember the lead researcher, he was a medical researcher named Bird, B-Y-R-D. And I found that in some fairly obscure journal, but a respected journal. And okay, and so he studied heart patients. he studied heart patients. And so the idea was, so it was a double-blind study. Neither the patients knew they were being prayed for, and the doctors didn't know they were being prayed for. So there was one group that was being prayed for by a group outside the hospital, prayed for to, the way he described it, the Judeo-Christian God. Of course, there's one God like that. But okay, so they were being prayed for, and they would just have the name of the patient. And the patients were randomly assigned. They had relatively equal severity of heart disease, recovery or like that. And so there was one group that was being prayed for, and the other group that was not being prayed for. And the doctors or patients didn't know who was being prayed for. Okay, so the group that was being prayed for, and the statistics were solid, the sample size was large enough to be significant, like that. The group that was being prayed for, they recovered a lot quicker, even though they didn't even know they were being prayed for. They recovered a lot quicker than the group that was not being prayed for. They healed a lot quicker like that. Okay, so what's particularly interesting for me, is, okay, I read that article in a journal, and there it is. Okay, and so what's interesting is that the world doesn't know about that study. Now here's the thing. Let's say the same results at the same significance levels, the same results were obtained by in their research on a new drug to cure heart disease. Oh my God, if the same levels of success were found, there'd be like $100 million invested. There'd be TV commercials. There'd be like, buy this now. You get it? You get it? But in those industries, there's not a lot of money to be made in
How you monetize that?
yeah, how do you monetize that? I mean, pray to God sincerely, and okay. So we're just kind of deconstructed. That's what I mean, the cheating propensity comes in. The cheating propensity comes in the name of so-called science, right? Like that. So again, of course, we're all for this. This is a science of self-realization. Science means we have the philosophy, a hypothesis that satisfies the intellect, and a process we can do. These are the pillars of the actual scientific method. Yeah. So, okay, so we want to become masterful. We want to develop mastery in being able to inspire people to truly question assumptions that they've not questioned yet, starting with ourselves. And then in that opening, there's a space for Bhagavatam. There's a space to, let me explore this alternative. This alternative paradigm. Yes. We might say in the world, if we look over the recent decades, there are three main movements. I mean, this is simplified. Three main movements. So this is what's called fundamentalism, which might represent what's called the pre-modern era. Like, I believe in the Quran, I believe in the Bible. Okay. Well, that's different. That's where we're going there. Because what we're saying, there's three main movements. And the Bhakti movement, philosophically and in terms of practical application, in terms of the actual Bhakti movement, includes all that is valid within those three movements, includes and transcends. So fundamentalism, another movement is, let's call it secular humanism, which is basically about what's called science. I don't believe in God, I believe in science, okay? Meaning, yes, like there's evolution, and we know that scientifically, because the scientific method is that you can actually do an experiment and see it. You don't have to just believe it. So just like if we sit on the porch for a few hours, we'll see one species transforming into another. No, actually we won't. But and this important point, but in the laboratories, they can, this thing, get people to think, like all smart people except evolution, you know that. Because it's scientific. Scientific means you can actually see it, you can experience it. Okay, so you get, well, as far as I know, no one's ever seen one species transform into another in nature, and no one's ever done it in a laboratory. So how is that scientific? No, it probably is, but just explain to me. We want to cultivate expertise in getting people to think and not simply to follow the herd of independent thinkers, follow the lemmings of independent thinkers. Right, the same, okay. So, same with the idea, life started from matter in the primordial soup. Okay, so recreate the conditions of the soup. Buy the chemicals, I'll lend you $1.50 or whatever you need, if you don't have the money. And then create a we're not even saying create like a human, create a mosquito, create an amoeba, please. Then we can talk about whether it's science. It's getting people to think of what they're assuming must be scientific. Okay, so secular humanism, fundamentalism, and a third, we'll call that New Age, the Green Movement. New Age, the Green Movement. And that gets a lot to like the oneness, the interconnectedness of all the universe, of all life. Okay, so yeah, so this I mean, it's a fascinating study, and we'll just go into it another 5 minutes. But so these are three main movements, each with their sex and interplay, and they're not mutually exclusive. But three main movements, and the Bhakti movement, the Chincha Beta Tattva, that we get through Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, through the Prabhupada, through Srila Prabhupada, it includes all that's wonderful and valid in all of those movements, and transcends, includes and transcends. So let's say the New Age, environmental, the oneness, that sort of thing. So there's certain that this verse talks about impersonalism and oneness, and it's true, but anti tattva vidas tattvam yatganamadvayam brahmiti paramatmiti bhagavamiti shatite. So learn to transcend according to one's perspective. One realizes the absolute in terms of non-personal energy, in terms of God in the heart, in terms of Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's all one, and there's distinctions, and that's the thing. So in Bhagavad philosophy, yeah, we honor, we respect the oneness, and at the same time we transcend. At the same time we transcend it, and we serve the personal source, Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, Personality of Godhead, and the oneness realization is included in that. Also, include and transcend. Also, Bhakti includes, let's call it, ethical moral systems to support us to realize the oneness of all spirit. Because, again, I mean, simplistically, that the fundamentalist movement represents pre-modern, the secular humanism represents modernism, and then the New Age, oneness, environmental, that represents postmodern. And postmodern, call it a somewhat serious shortcoming, is there's no real foundation for ethical behavior. Okay, a psychology, and Prabhupada describes this in the purport to the 10th verse of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and other places, many other places. A psychology of stopping our spiritual life in impersonalism. Again, impersonalism, it's valid. Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita that he says there's no reason for conflict. Right? There's no reason for conflict between personalist and impersonalist. Another place in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada emphasizes. He says, he says, there's the personalists, the impersonalists, and there's the devotees. Meaning, the devotees are not in any camp. They're not in any sectarian political camp, right? They appreciate all aspects of realization of the absolute. Okay, so the psychology behind stopping it in impersonalism and denying a personal creator, a personal source, is I want to be the controller. I want to think of myself as spiritual, and of course that's like someone who's truly advancing towards impersonalization is rising above the bodily conception. So that's spiritual. At the same time, I want to be the controller and I don't want to surrender. And so therefore I'm going to find ways to deny the existence of a person greater than me. And so, and the idea is, because the idea is I want to believe in spirit, maybe even call God, whatever. But when it comes down to it, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do. And that's it. I want to be able to do whatever I want to do. And that's why it's described that Shankaracharya's philosophy leads to increased population. We can connect the dots there. Because there's not really a system for getting the higher taste. Okay. And then with with fundamentalism, the idea, including accepting a higher authority that gives knowledge that is beyond our senses, and that's important. That's important to accept higher authority. Same thing as if we follow the history, those authorities became corrupt and they were no longer representing, the authentic origin, God, Allah, I don't know, Jesus. So they were no longer representing these true godly personalities. At the same time, so then in Master fundamentalism, again, the idea is, well, smart, intelligent, educated people don't accept such things, because you got things like, creation started 5,000 years ago and stuff like that. So here, so the idea is like, here is a source for authorized knowledge to connect into that, where we can really get knowledge that's beyond the limit of our mind and senses. It's not irrational, it's transrational. It's not anti-empirical, it's trans-empirical. Okay, and it's satisfying for intelligent people. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, you like logic and argument? Apply your capacity for logic and argument to this philosophy of Lord Chaitanya. You'll find it strikingly wonderful. Okay, so like we don't need to accept that the world started 5,000 years ago. Here it describes cycles within cycles within. Yeah, 5,000 years ago, that's a cycle within a cycle with a cycle called Kali Yuga. But here it describes cycles of 311 trillion, 40 billion years, and within that there's the Manu cycle, and there's descriptions of how things go from gross to subtle, very scientific descriptions. So it's accepting this ancient eternal authority within a context that fully satisfies the intellect. As a side point, I've heard some analysis of the first line of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. So the way it's translated in any English version I've seen is in the beginning, but not that I'm a Hebrew scholar, but in the beginning would be Ba Bereshit. Ba Bereshit. But Bereshit is actually in a beginning. But it's never translated that. So in a beginning indicates the Judaic tradition cycle.
I heard it in the Kabbalah too.
In the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
So, interesting discussion. And then with science, well, we talked a little bit about science, that yeah, definitely a scientific method to advance knowledge, a scientific method to advance knowledge. And certainly what's in modern science has been tremendously successful. For example, to create this internet I mean, that's a tremendous success of modern science to create whatever technology we want to look at, the airplane like that. Of course, then when it's used in ways that are not truly satisfying for Mother Earth, then it causes so many troubles like that. Okay, so but it's like, again, so we create the internet and we can create the automobile and the airplane and so many medicines and this and that. So therefore life comes from matter, and therefore consciousness does not exist, or therefore everything started from a nothingness chunk exploding. Well, no, say that. It's because people tend to get enamored by the technological successes, so therefore I'll accept whatever you say about creation. Okay. So a true scientific method for knowledge, and a scientific method that brings us to understanding. It brings us to understanding consciousness in materialistic science. There's no, I mean, consciousness is just a problem. It's just a problem. But if we get the spiritual science, we can include what's effective about the scientific method and transcend it to give a much fuller explanation of the universe. That includes subjective experience, that includes consciousness. So include and transcend for all these three movements. And so Om Purnam Manaha Purnamidam Purnam Purnamidachite Purnasya Purnamade Purnameva Vishishate. Right? And so the idea is, everything's a perfect and complete arrangement. That's the invocation to Upanishad that I just quoted. Everything's a perfect and complete arrangement to realize ourselves as conscious beings, to realize ourselves as not matter. And this chapter is helping us to do that, to realize ourselves as spirit, soul, but that's not complete. Spirit, soul, and what's the function of spirit, soul? To serve the Purusha. So to serve the Supreme Purusha, Aprayamitas Tranya, and Prakritim Vidimekram, Jiva Bhuta Mahabaho Yayedem Davite Jagat. So Krishna describes matter in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And he says, and then there's this other, then there's the conscious living entities. And so the conscious living, we are Purusha in a sense in relation to matter. Shakti, there's Shakti and Purusha. Ultimately though, we're Shakti. And we're meant to be enjoyed by the Supreme Purusha. When we forget that, then we try to be the Purusha, the enjoyer over material energy. And that's frustrating. Okay, I've touched briefly on several philosophical themes here. I'll read the verse again and we can open it up to discussion. Avyaktarasa sindhunam bhutanam nidanasya udaram viditam pumso vidayam manasahampanam. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entities. The materially annihilated living entities. The spirit doesn't get annihilated. The matter that forms the bodies gets annihilated. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. Hare Krishna. Thanks for your presence and attention. And I welcome any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes, Patrick, I'm hearing you.
Okay. Excuse me. You mentioned so the three different movements. You know, basically the science people and the the new age kind of green people, and then the fundamentalists.
Yeah.
And I imagine them like a Venn diagram. You know, three different circles.
Yeah.
And
And
then
there's overlap. There's overlap. Yeah.
There's overlap, but really in the middle, there's like no overlap really, or at least what I see in society. You know, with the Venn diagram, there's 3 overlapping circles, and so there's a place in the middle where all 3 overlap. But in practicality, there's really not much that's in the middle with the 3 things. I think of, like, you know, with like vaccines, like the fundamentalist people and the kind of green people can team up on, like, no vaccines, but then the science people are, like, you know, pro-vaccine. Or, like, you know, with the environment, you know, the green people and the science people can team up and be like pro-environment, but the fundamentalists maybe not so much, you know, with the policies or, you know, things, actions like global warming or something like that. And then, like, with you know, the fundamentalists and the green and the fundamentalists and the new age people can kind of team up with a distrust of, you know, mainstream modern science. You know, so there's ways they can team up against the other one, but there's no real, you know, meeting in the middle. And like you said, what Prabhupada gave is a circle that overlaps all 3 circles. You know, it's one giant circle that includes everything, and that Prabhupada really gave us the solution for everything, and to the Western world specifically, and for the whole world. Then it's not just you know, a house the whole world can live in. And it's not just that, you know, everyone in the world is going to be a devotee with, you know, Tilak and Sika and Dodi and everything. But that would be great to have as many as possible. But it's our responsibility, like you did with the Maha Mantra studies, and you're talking about with, like, the research and getting this information to people in a way that they can, you know, understand it and accept it. Because you know, with this you know, with the virus that's happening, and I you know, just watched this documentary that was just quickly skimmed it, I guess. But it was basically, the basic thesis is that, you know, all these outbreaks, pandemics and things, the SARS and everything, Ebola, any kind of pandemic or outbreak that there's been is like a direct result of coming into contact with these wild animals, either through directly, like, exploiting them and eating them, or just deforestation and going into their habitats and making contact with them. And it's like, it's completely, you know, solvable by, you know, if we're in Prabhupada's house and we're living according to what he taught us, then that wouldn't be happening, you know. So it's just like, you know, Prabhupada he didn't come to just give the spiritual people something to do, or like, okay, for us weirdos who want to chant Hare Krishna and, you know, dance around. He gave a solution for all of mankind and every person in the world, and it's not just, you know, the us crazies, you know.
I appreciate very much your insights and comments, Dr. Patrick. Yeah, I like that point, that for all combinations of 2 of the 3 circles, there's clear overlap. But as far as all 3 circles are overlapping, yeah, that practically that doesn't exist. And then what we get from Prabhupada, which is the eternal, sublime, cosmogonal Vedic knowledge. Yes, that includes what is good about all of them, and it transcends, like with fundamentalism. Yeah, okay, accepting a supreme authority, but at the same time, in the name of fundamentalism, there's so much just pig-headed sectarianism, and so this is truly universal. And of course, in the name of Prabhupada's movement, in the name of Krishna consciousness, we can fall into something that's not transcendental. It becomes, oh, I'm a Hare Krishna, and Hare Krishnas are the best, and that completely misses Prabhupada's point. It becomes another form of sectarianism. So of course, we want to be on guard about that. Thanks for your comments, Dr. Patrick. Danielle, I saw your hand up.
Hare Krishna, dear Govinda. Kind of touching on what Dr. Patrick just shared and what you were just saying, I'm questioning, based on this non-sectarian foundation of truth, and much more truth than I think most people are capable of handling, really, at least where they're at currently, as I observe them. What is the mood of a devotee? when interacting with others, right? We don't want to embarrass or embitter. We also don't want to be whimsical and say everything's fine and be all embracing of everything. How are we as devotees? I mean, I know that in the Christian mindset, we want to go tell the good news, right? We want to convert everyone. We want to proselytize. We want to really, set the flame out for everyone, and then everybody gets in, the whole world becomes Christian. But is that the mood of a devotee, or are we here like in a different way where, yes, we want people who are already enthusiastic to set them on the path and, bring them into the movement? But is it our goal to have everyone converted? That doesn't seem to be my sense. But how is it that we interact with, the three movements as you've outlined it so succinctly? How is it that we interact with them in a way that's for their betterment and increases and advances Prabhupada's movement?
Thanks for your question, Bhakti and Danielle. What's coming to me is the kind of language we use in transformative communication, transformative coaching, which is our endeavor in an unconventional way to give this transcendental process to people. Unconventional words like Prabhupada gave us kirtan, in Bhagavatam class, the kind of like seminars or coach training programs. It's the essence, but the form's different. So the idea is we meet people where they're at, starting with ourselves, and we speak to the spark that wants to grow. We meet people where they're at, and we speak to the spark that wants to grow. So empathy, compassion, again, starting with ourselves. And as far as how to fan that spark that wants to grow, sometimes it might look like genuinely appreciating the areas of agreement and then giving them a sweet ball. We can get into those distinctions, but we get the point. Or sometimes it could be playfully challenging in their face, right? Just like I did that in this class with some role playing, like, oh yeah, evolution, yes, yeah, that's the scientific, okay. So, science means you can actually do an experiment and experience it. So, I don't know, so far in my life, I haven't seen one species. Have you changed into another? Oh, you haven't actually seen it, but you just accept it. So sometimes we might want to intelligently get people to question, to foster growth, open-ended questions. There's a letter, December 1972, from Srila Prabhupada to Balavanta. That's Bilogo. He's a lawyer locally, and he's a graduate of the Software Advanced Seminar. And but Prabhupada says to Bilogo, he says, and Balavanta, he was in politics at the time. I think he was running for mayor of Atlanta. And then Prabhupada says, look, if we want to attract intelligent people, we need to be really good listeners. And he cites Lord Chaitanya listening for several days to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Really good listeners, understanding their points of view, appreciating their points of view in a spirit of discovery, right? I know we've all had experience that someone who's not a devotee, and we hear from them, we enter deeply into their world, and we get so much realization from that. We get so much deeper understanding. Maybe doubts surface that I was pushing down like the beach ball. So Prabhupada said, especially if we want to attract intelligent people, we need to be really good listeners, appreciating their points of view, being tolerant, being patient. So meeting ourselves and others where we're at, always with the spirit of encouraging, inspiring, not forcing, inspiring a spirit of discovery that leads to consciousness expansion and personal growth. And yeah, it's not about conversion. I would say it's not about conversion, it's about convergence. Convergence. Thanks for your question, Danielle.
Yeah, planting the seed is what's coming up for me. That's what I'm hearing. Planting the seed.
Nice.
What is convergence?
Convergence, like, yeah, where do we, like, oh, you're a Muslim, you're Hare Krishna, you're a Jew. Okay, well, okay, it seems like let's converge in chanting the names of God. Oh, you're an environmentalist, so we can appreciate how good that would be for Mother Earth if we're vegetarian. And we have a process called prasadam, where it's like really conscious vegetarianism. Let's hear about that. Like, what are the points of similarity? And when there's points of divergence, okay, let's go get into the Socratic method and question and be in a spirit of discovery.
It sounds like the word sound, kirtan. The sound is
Yes.
together.
Yes. Bhakta Keith.
Yeah, I was just, I'm like 80% clear on this, and I'm kind of still connecting the dots as I'm speaking. So
Yes, I'm with you.
Cohesive.
Yes.
So yeah, I was thinking after yesterday, meditating more about seeing the Virat Rupa and nature, and I was thinking about the mountains. You know, how the qualities of the mountains, of how they're so firmly planted, like
Yes.
so solid, stable, majestic, you know, creates an experience of awe and reverence. And yeah, there's like deep power there, deep silent power. But then I remembered how in the verse it says that the mountains are stacked on the bones of Vishnu, Krishna.
Yes.
And then I got a little picture of what that meant, you know, like all those mountains stacked on the bones. And then I thought, like, wow, then what would that mean for the bones, right? How great, how strong.
What a strong foundation.
Yeah. So I guess that was and just appreciating the approach to making the connection to the transcendental realization, or connecting it to Krishna. And then somebody was mentioning yesterday about how we treat nature, you know, like seeing that everything is connected to Krishna, and that how we, in relation to how we treat it. So we can just try to, like, oh, I'm just gonna treat nature nice. I'm gonna treat it respectfully, but then it could be like artificial. But then I was thinking back to the book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Oh, well, yeah, in Nectar of Instruction, it says that attitude is the most important thing on spiritual life. And in the 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, he's talking about paradigm or relative perception.
Yeah.
Or what was the term that you were saying for that in the class?
Subjectivity.
Yeah, subjective vision of things. So he was saying in that book that our attitude is based on what our subjective opinion, or our vision of things is, you know. So the knowledge of these things comes into play of seeing how everything is connected to Krishna. Then that affects our attitude. We need to change our vision of the way of people. We need to start seeing people as being divine children, you know, and then our attitude naturally changes towards them. It's not like something that I have to believe in my head. Oh, everybody's a spirit soul, so I'm just going to go around and try to treat everybody like that. It's like, no, I need to like learn how to see the divine qualities in myself. I need to learn how to see the divine qualities in other people, and then my attitude will naturally follow, you know. And that's what I'm processing. Like, attitude would be like the realm of experience, right? Does that sound correct?
Experience, yeah. Actual perception. Like Krishna says, prajakshabagamam dharmyam shushukam kotamabhyam. This knowledge, it's not just cognitive, it's directly perceived, it's directly experienced.
Yeah.
It's an actual transformation of consciousness. And thanks for that, Bhakti Keith. And for me, that relates to the different movements or paradigms. So direct experience, well, that's science, an experiment. Whereas in a lot of the fundamental movements, it's a lot about like, do you believe? Do you believe? Here it's just like, sure, there's philosophy and we can accept, not accept, but real spiritual life, the real essence of religion is an experience. It's actually scientific in that sense.
Yeah, and that's where the people that they hold it as just a belief in their head, and then because they have to maintain this belief, you gotta like always do something. You gotta always say, "Did you know Jesus is the only way? Did you know Jesus is the only way?" You just gotta like scream at people, and like to keep convincing yourself of this, right? And then it becomes like this forceful and imposing thing on people rather than having,
Because there's a lack of actual experience.
yeah, and recognizing the value of the transcendental knowledge. That way we can, like Patrick was saying, we can bridge the between the three overlapping places, because that's what every action is on the transcendental platform.
So there's the chat. I'm going to read the chat. Okay. So, so the sound is choppy.
Sometimes it gets choppy when you move it, so it needs to be moved gently. That's what I've experienced in the past.
Okay, so Ladini wrote butterfly, and George Danielle Sarasvati wrote, a butterfly does not evolve into another creature. Butterflies continue to exist as a set life cycle of transformation from caterpillar to butterfly that never deviates. Evolution is such that one thing transforms into another independently of a lifestyle so that it continues in perpetuity as that new life form, right? And they've not done that in laboratories. Thanks for that, George. Okay.
Is that why
Where's Danielle?
What's that?
Is that why Sattva is a butterfly?
Yeah, it's a symbol of transformation. Though it's not a symbol of material evolution. Are you hearing me? Hearing me? Sort of choppy still. We need to improve on this. Okay. What about this thing?
This is just a space that I'm going to check if it's still speaker. Maybe it decided to be here. Yeah, mic is from the camera.
Yeah, I want to no?
Yeah, Ladini, yeah.
The class that Prabhupada was playing soccer, that was sweet to hear. And then
sweet.
And then I appreciate Patrick's appreciation for like the grounded, like the practical, like that Prabhupada not only gave us a spiritual path, like he really gave us like a grounded, practical health lifestyle path. So I appreciate Patrick's appreciation. And I was thinking in like the similar connection, the crazy cow disease. So like how that appeared is that people were feeding cows the meat bone flour. So they were feeding cows to the cows, which like doesn't make much common sense. And then the people who got like infected, it's only when you eat brain tissue that's not cooked properly. So like who does that? And then as a cure for that, they killed like millions and hundreds of millions of cows on the whole planet. So that's completely crazy. Like instead of like rectify the behavior, which would make more sense. Anyway, so like without being connected to a guru, we are like so hopeless. We are so hopeless in the material world with like any kind of human endeavor whatsoever. Just like no intelligence, no common sense, nothing.
Yeah, just cycling down and down into more and more degraded activities and degraded consciousness. Well, thanks for sharing your appreciation.
And not only
about-
like degraded, but like also complete nonsense. Like, how does it?
Not- yeah. Good. Yeah. This looks like, okay. Material. The context of the material world. There's still going to be disease, this and that. So one thing is that as we, develop Krishna consciousness, devotional consciousness, self-realization, we're not disturbed by the disturbances. Another thing is, to the extent that we live a sattvic, reasonably transcendental life, guided by the Paramparacharyas, guided by Srila Prabhupada, then the disturbances are less. There will be less disease, because just like you're looking at how so many of these diseases, Prabhupada talks about one type of disease, and he goes, oh yes, those types of diseases start when people have sex with dogs. So he just says it very clearly. And Prabhupada would say, I don't like to talk about these things, but that whole types of diseases start when people have sex with dogs. So Prabhupada knows what's going on. The Acharya, the Bhagavatam knows what's going on. It's all there. And then you describe like this really weird stuff with death and animals and meat. So of course it's going to create all sorts of warped viruses. And so again, the best way to be an ecologist or an environmentalist, yeah, we serve Krishna, Mother Bhumi's happy, and the lifestyle is clean and like that. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Anne?
Yes, Hare Krishna. Thank you for class this morning. I wanted to share a little bit about strategies for survival versus strategies for living. So in my post-advanced course interview with Brielle yesterday, it became apparent that I'm still living a little bit in the survival of survival for strategies for living. And because I want to appear right, I want to be looking good and always be right. And so I appreciated Danielle's question, because I'm seeing how if I'm coming from the perspective that I'm right and you're wrong, that's not going to be a very impactful discussion, or one that I'm really listening closely to them to understand their perspective and meeting them where they're at. So it was just tiny examples that I shared with Brielle, but it realized that I'm 100% responsible for that conversation. And
wow.
Yeah, so I'm appreciating knowing how to bring Krishna consciousness by being completely open and transparent, and also be receiving.
Thanks for sharing that, Anne. I'm very moved to hear about that interview you had with Brielle and the realizations you're getting from it. I'm reminded the first Sappho foundational seminar, or an early version of the foundational, was in North Florida, was late in 1999. And in those days, like pretty much everyone who took the seminars, everyone in that seminar identified as a devotee. And so there was one Prabhu in that seminar, and he used to spend a lot of time at the Gainesville Center, and he would preach to people. He was doing it for like 25 years, like that. Anyhow, so that seminar was taught every Tuesday night. It wasn't the intensive 3-day format. So he came back like the second or third week, and he was so excited. He wanted to share a story. He said that he went to the Gainesville Center, and there was like a college student, maybe 18 or 19 years old, and she started talking to him about her life. And he said that he did something new and different. He actually listened to her, and he actually respected who she was and what she had to say, rather than thumping her on the head with the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. And he was hearing about her struggles with her boyfriend and her fear that her parents won't support her education, and she wants to change her major. And he was just really in her world. And then he shared with a group, and then he said something completely different happened that never happened before. She became interested in what he had to say, and because usually he'll just thump them on the head with the Bhagavad Gita, and then they'll go away, and then he feels very right. That's because they're karmi demons, and and then someone else will come and will thumb. So he really entered there, and he said, she really developed an interest in what I had to say. And that was uncomfortable because that hasn't happened before. Usually, like, there's this antagonism, and I'm a preacher. So that was in the very first Safetov. It was before we were using the name Safetov, 1999, here in North Florida. And so, yeah, and Prabhupada has so many guidance for his disciples where, like, you know, we need to understand what they're saying. Otherwise, it just becomes, you know, out of our own insecurity, we need to feel like we're preaching, and like
another dogma.
And it becomes another dogma. Prabhupada has a letter to Jagadish, also December 1972, Jagadish Das. And he says, the perfection of your development of Krishna consciousness will be when you're able to share this eternal, universal, transcendental knowledge in such a way such that everyone will appreciate, everyone will respond positively. Meaning, maybe you're talking to a simple person who works land, or you're talking to a group of professors, or you're speaking on the street, or speaking in your home, wherever that we're so realized that we find ways to communicate in such a way that everyone can connect and appreciate. Thanks for sharing. George.
Hare Krishna, David. Something that a part of your presentation that I kind of honed in on was when you were mentioning about Shankaracharya and how ultimately, like, the movement led to kind of overpopulation.
Yeah.
And then I also was hearing you say that Prabhupada offers us, like, ethics, you know, like an ethical kind of approach to
framework, and ethical framework.
Yeah. And then I also which is something that I appreciate very deeply, but I was also reminded of the Nectar of Instruction. I believe that's where I read this, where I think Rupa Goswami mentions that specifically to sex desire, and in terms of, like, population control. I think he mentions, and I could be wrong, but you can correct me, that the way to control sex desire in a practical sense is through controlling the tongue, through chanting, and through eating prasadam. And I remember that had such an impact on me because there's, like, we can talk about morality and ethics, and, you know, like, discuss principles and just rely on, I don't know, it's like, just from growing up Christian, like, relying on, like, I don't know, penance and things like that. But I feel like when Rupa Goswami says, you know, chant and then eat prasadam, like, it's such a, also at the same time, a practical, like, oh, you mean, like, this is what I can do, and then I can get this result where I have, you know what I mean? Like, it's like very highly intellectual and attractive to the intelligence. And it's also very practical, and, like, not really requiring such, like, effort and, you know, like, struggle to do.
Thanks. Yeah, Jiva Vegam Udara Pasta Vegam, Nectar of Instruction. Rupa Goswami described it's a line, the tongue, and then the belly and the genitals. And so we control the tongue with eating only prasad. And if the tongue's wild and this and that, and then the belly's not controlled, and then that pushes on the genitals. So it's, as you said, very scientific process. I appreciate your appreciation there. I appreciate, this comment from Brielle. She writes, it seems like it's a balance between being learned in Prabhupada's books and being experienced at empathy and transformative communication. Some people are more experienced in one more than the other, but a balance is the most transcendentally impactful tool. I like that very much. Yes, because we meet people where they're at. Otherwise, there's not a receptivity. And at the same time, we meet people where they're at, and we want to be learned and realized intellectually and experientially in Prabhupada's books, so that we're able to share in a way that inspires cleansing of the diamond, that inspires progress towards life's ultimate goal of self-realization and pure devotional service to the Supreme. So yeah, they go hand in hand, and that's a big reason, like we saw in the devotional communities, there wasn't this like capacity for deep listening and meeting ourselves and others where we're at, and then all of these spiritual bypasses and being ignorant in the name of transcendence. So yes, we want to be deeply learned in Prabhupada's books, intellectually and in our realization, to be able to share appropriately, meet someone where they're at in a way, because in a way that truly inspires spiritual growth. Thanks for that, Brielle.
In my experience is also a lot like the true non-sectarian approach. Like first I was attracted to this because it felt non-sectarian, and I would be like really repulsed in the past by something that's like this path and all the others are wrong. But then as I started to practice, I really like went a lot into this is the best and everything else is useless. And I'm still there, but less. And like I can see when I'm like preaching that it's like that's like making big difference when I'm like truly like, let's say I meet a Christian and it's like a true conversation, and I actually get like so much value when I let go of this sectarian approach. And then the other person also is much more receptive and gets more value. So I think, and I think any true spiritual path like leads us to be less and less sectarian and not more and more. And then it has effect.
Thanks for sharing that, Ladini. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, appreciate. Also, my sense is that we don't know where in a spiritual path. Like we can meet someone in the street who doesn't know how to chant Hare Krishna or never ate a gulab jamun in their life, but then maybe they have many lifetimes of practicing Krishna consciousness. And by listening to them, we get enlightened. At least that's my experience. By listening to people, I get enlightenment because I may hear things that I never realized before. And then their realization is uplifting me, and then vice versa. And I just want to look at a verse that I really like. It's the 10 chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's there is a word in that verse 9. It says bodhayanta. It says preaching, and then if we read the translation, it said, they derive great satisfaction and bliss from enlightening one another and conversing about me. So that's the essence of preaching, is to derive great satisfaction and bliss and enlightening one another and conversing about me. So if we do that in the street or with people, then it feels very fulfilling. And then that's the essence of Sankirtan, as Ramachandra was saying.
Thanks very much for that, Malini. Yeah, when a foundational course starts or an advanced course or Safatok 3, and like whoever comes there, let's say especially a foundational, because these are people I don't have experience with. For me, that is association with devotees. That because when it says dividing great bliss and association, it means like everyone who comes there, I'm going to say 99.9% my experience, maybe a few exceptions, but pretty much everyone who comes to a Safatok seminar, coach training, they are sincere about self-realization. They're sincere to distinguish reality from illusion. They're courageously in the spirit of discovery. And we can say, so that's why their association, even though maybe they've never chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, for me, it's so much more enlivening association than many, in my experience, who regard themselves as devotees who chant 16 rounds per day, or like that. and I'm not saying that those who chant 16 rounds per day are in a box and like that. Like, I mean, let's have both for sure. But yeah, thanks for that. And it's like if I'm facilitating a group or I'm conducting a coaching session related to our discussion here, my intention is to meet people where they're at, to create a sacred space, And in that sacred space, I'm neutral. No, I'm not neutral. Neutrality is an impossibility. Quantum physics describes that, right? Our consciousness affects the space. So yeah, I want to create a sacred space where all expression of emotion and thought and beliefs are permissible, especially those that feel vulnerable, maybe shameful, and maybe all be rejected. We create a safe, sacred space. And in that space, I'm bringing my consciousness, whether I want to or not. We're all bringing our consciousness. That's why, let's say if the 3 days before I come into that coaching session or that seminar, I'm watching mindless TV or mindless surfing on the internet, I'm engaged in degrading habits, I'm bringing that consciousness into the space of the coaching session, and that will influence the choices people make in that space. And let's say if in the days and the hours prior to that session or that seminar, I'm absorbed in Bhagavatam, morning program, chanting Hare Krishna, enlightened conversation, then I'm bringing that sattvic transcendental consciousness into the coaching session space. It's not that I'm trying to coerce or manipulate. It's just we all bring our consciousness into the space, and that's why it's a weighty responsibility. What consciousness are we cultivating that we bring into the space of a seminar or a coaching session? Because that influences whether we want it to or not. Anandini.
Could you say a few words about, like Patrick and also Ladini, like mentioned about how if everyone were to follow like Prabhupada's ethics, then there wouldn't be like viruses or situations like now, or also it's like the statement that Prabhupada can build a house where everyone can live, and at the same time Prabhupada saying there's no utopia, or there's Kali Yuga and then there's the golden age. I'd like to hear I'm feeling tortured in my mind, like and some doubts, or how to bring this together. I seem to have a very dreamy idea of this peaceful world, or this, you know, and that dreamy idea gets shattered again and again and again, and I'm frustrated and hurt and in pain. And so, yeah, if maybe you could say a few words about this.
Prabhupada has several letters. He speaks about utopia, and he speaks about it rather negatively. Meaning, he says it tends to represent an impersonal idea. Many of his disciples would write to him about, I'm having argument and conflict with this one. He goes, argument and conflict. Oh, that's personalism. We're different persons. We're going to have different perspectives. And so there's going to be that we don't all think the same. That's personalism. And to do our best to cooperate and to value, celebrate the differences in service to the same goal, in service to Krishna. And then we move towards Vaikuntha. We move towards a place of anxiety, a place free from anxiety. And yeah, as far as ethics, just like, okay, let's say just for the basic ground rules, basic regulative principles. So we can talk about pollution, water pollution, air pollution. Okay, so let's say just the basic ground rules of, let's be vegetarian, or if you must eat meat, at least, follow some regulation. Don't do the slaughterhouses. Then immediately, that's good for the Amazon forest. That's good for creating clean rivers without separately endeavoring to clean the rivers. Or let's say, we stay away from gambling or illicit sexual activity. We regulate our sexual activity. So much anxiety and torment and murder and disease, it comes from the irregulated sex activity, and then through the whole drugs. There's so much insanity, so we don't need so much insanity comes from the drug. So just the basic regulative principles. Benjamin Franklin said, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So we get up at 4 a.m. before sunrise. It's a healthy habit. So personal health, the health of the rivers, like that. And then, right. And then disturbances are minimized. It becomes more and more like Satya Yuga and less like Kali Yuga. Still, we don't want to become unrealistically, dreamily hopeful. That it means, like when Prabhupada sort of criticizes the utopia concept, it's sort of like, because he sees in the name of utopia, not just from his disciples, but even when he was growing up and in the different things he saw, in the name of utopia, that it's to like escape consciousness, escape responsibility, to escape personal relations. And so the idea is accept reality, just like sure, ideally, metaphorically, all the citizens will follow the laws of the government and be law-abiding. Okay, still, the government builds prisons. The government builds prisons not to encourage criminal behavior, but they know there's going to be a certain percentage that are going to act in a criminal way, so there needs to be a prison for rehabilitation. So to accept that here in the material realm, sure, we can just like say the past few hours here in this morning program or afternoon program for some of you, that okay, yeah, this is Vaikuntha, this is utopia for a few hours. Still, not to become attached, so there will never be conflict or disagreement. That whether it's due to my shortcoming or your shortcoming or some combination, there's going to be conflict and tension. Let's accept that as part of the material context. Let's accept that and not become frustrated and depressed and angry when the disturbances happen, whether in the form of interpersonal conflict or disease. That's the material context. Let that move me to deeper enthusiasm for the transcendental process of devotional service, to fully liberate myself from all from all material disturbances. I don't know if that responds, but that's what came to me.
Well, it increases the sense of feeling weak. Like how do I go about spiritual life in this world? How do I deal with, just all the disturbances in an empathic way, in an empowering way, and to take it, it just increases this sense of a sense of, I don't know the word, helplessness,
powerlessness, weakness. Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it, is like we see all these disturbances. Let's say this coronavirus disease or whatever. Okay, I mean, we have the opportunity to respond like, yeah, let me practice spiritual life more seriously, because this is the solution. This is the solution to truly liberate myself and all spirit souls from birth, death, old age, and disease. And let me get more urgent about really being Krishna conscious and giving myself 100% of the time, because this is the solution. Because the real problems of life are birth, death, old age, disease. Everything else is a subset of that. And so as long as you or your neighbor or me or my neighbors or my friends, as long as we are as long as we have material attachment, we're going to experience one disease after the next. Yes, we will. No, they're going to find a vaccine. No, one disease after the next, and people will die. Sometimes they'll die in their 80s or 90s, and sometimes they'll die at a young age, and we're going to experience the effect of old age and experience cheating. That's the result of material attachment. So we get to let me be urgent and enthusiastic and happy and joyful to really give up material attachment and not to just do nothing, but to cultivate attachment to spirit, cultivate attachment to that process that is free from death, old age, disease. So we can respond with deeper enthusiasm to give up material attachment and cultivate spiritual attachment. That means attachment to chanting Hare Krishna and sharing it with others. Otherwise, this disease went away and maybe by June it goes away. There's going to be another disease and another, and it's going to get worse. Yes, comment there?
Yes, I do have a comment. I'm thinking maybe something that would maybe support you, Anandini, is like in a seminar, for example, National Course and Advanced Course, people go through experiences that are very, very painful. They are crazy painful and like really, most people, if they were put in those situations outside of the training room, interpersonal situation, any situation, they will really struggle to find a thread to it. But because it's within the safety of the seminar, within the context of the seminar, then even if they go to the medicine game, or let's say, they really take it seriously, we trust that whatever pain is coming up, that pain is purposeful. That pain is aligned with completion and the perfection of God creation. And then that doesn't bring us to carelessness. It brings us to empathy. And that empathy is like holding space for the person to get self-realization. So similarly, like when I look at what's happening in the world, all the craziness on so many levels, it's worse and worse. Every year it's worse and worse. And it's going to go down. It's like, it's going down, it's going to be worse and worse. I'm in a world for 58 years and things are getting worse every time, all the time. More and more sinful activity, more craziness. And I endeavor to create trust and faith that the Supreme Facilitator is an expert. And my role is to be on staff. And my role as a staff is not to be sentimental about the pain, but really holding space as much as I can for people to see that the Supreme Facilitator knows what he's doing and to trust that, regardless how hellish what they are going through is.
Thank you. I can connect to that example.
I'm thinking we might cite the example of Prahlad Maharaj. He's a personification of empathy and compassion. Prahlad Maharaj is saying to Lord Nrsingadev, I don't want to be liberated till everyone's liberated. He was feeling paradukha dukkha, he was feeling the pain and suffering of others like his own. And he had transcendental knowledge. And he was feeling so much pain and suffering. He didn't want relief from suffering. Of course, he was completely Prahlad, blissful. But in his humility, he said, I don't want to be liberated till everyone's liberated. He was feeling the suffering of those in the prison house of material existence. And he had transcendental knowledge. It's Prahlad Maharaj who says the verse, the 9 processes of bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Bandhanam, Achanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atman, Nivedanam, hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna, doing deity worship. And so Prahlad Maharaj, related to Brielle's comment, he had empathy, compassion, and he had transcendental knowledge to give to the whole world. And so it's not like he was spiritual, so he had no empathy or compassion, and neither is it he had empathy and compassion, so I'm just suffering with you in ignorance. No, he had, because we relieve our suffering and other suffering with true knowledge, So empathy, compassion moves us to cultivate, realize knowledge, and to share it.
Yeah, thank you. I know for me, the most difficult is not so much the suffering. I trust the suffering is purposeful, but the most difficult is to see people suffering in vain. It seems so difficult, and that's why I feel urgent about supporting people to not fight the suffering or try to eradicate it, and rather to see the purpose of it, because it feels so painful of that people are suffering in ignorance, in complaint, like it looks like it's in vain. And that feels very painful when people don't have the transcendental vision or the understanding.
Thank you, Malini. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.